Okay. So today we'll primarily be doing Excel work. So the file we're using is that COVID blank file. Probably won't finish everything today. We'll pick back up on Monday. A lot of it's going to be Excel. I'll try to go through it slow. I'm going to try to, I'm assuming that almost nothing. But if I go too quick, or I say something, or you're having trouble, speak up, stop me, so we make sure we kind of get those answered right away. Okay. I see some of you still joining, so I might kind of see these little pop-ups here, people getting in. We're going to start out with where do we leave off? So if I remember right, we left off kind of talking about, we talked about pie charts. We talked about creating bins for continuous data. I forget exactly how far we got in this section. I don't think we did. That's what I thought. Okay, so we'll start here. So we talked last class, just kind of visually how we would create these frequency distributions for qualitative variables, right? When we're looking at letter grades, those are A, B, C, those weren't numerical, right? Well, what if we want to do it with discrete or continuous data? Well, for discrete data, it's pretty easy because all we have to do, instead of treating it as like A, B, C, or D, let's say I had the number of children in a household, I would just count the number of households with 0 kids, number of households with 1 kid, all the way up to 19 or whatever the highest number would be. Right? And then once I have those frequencies, well, now it's just like I had before. Now I have frequencies, I can quickly, pretty easily put those into a bar chart. Right? Now, what if I have continuous data? We're actually going to have to do something a little different, and we're going to have to create some bins, right? Because let's say I had income. How would I do that? Well, I'd count the number of people who make $0, the number of people who make 1 cent, the number of people who make 2 cents, all the way up to whatever Jeff Bezos is making. It's going to be an absurd-looking bar graph, and it's just a waste of time. Right? It doesn't display a lot of information to me. So we're going to create these bins and do something like count the number of people who make between $0 and $50,000, number of people who make between $50,000 and $100,000, so on and so forth. Right? Now, sometimes we'll have to create kind of one of these catch-all categories, because even if we did that, there'd be so many categories going up into the millions that we might just do that up into $200,000 and say anyone who makes over 200. Okay? So we might have a catch-all category, but other than that, what we want to try to do when we create these bins, is choose a number of classes between 5 and 20, and then make sure they all have the same bin length, right? When I say 0 to 50, 50 to 100,000, sorry, 0 to 50,000, 50,000 to 100, it's the same length of bin, right? How do I choose that bin? Well, in my example, I was just giving you a number as an example, but a way to do it once you have the actual data is to use this formula right here. Okay? So if I use this formula right here, it'll tell me what the kind of quote unquote optimal bin length would be for me to use. Okay? What that will do is, how do I find that? I'll take the maximum value of my data set. So that'd be like taking the highest income, subtracting the lowest values, my lowest income, and dividing by the number of bins I want, something between 5 and 20. Right? So this is usually a good place to start, but notice, even with the income example, if I try to use this, well, it's going to be Jeff Bezos minus 0 divided by 20 is still some crazy large categories, and almost everyone's going to be in that first category, 0 to whatever. So, you have to play, use some common sense when you're doing this. And in any homework assignment or Excel example I give you, I'll tell you what that length should be just to kind of make it easy. But this is usually an equation that gives us a pretty good place to start. Okay? Especially if we don't have kind of a really wide range of data like we do with income. So some other guidelines we want to make sure we follow. The bins or these classes must be mutually exclusive. So when I said how many people make between 0 and 50,000, how many people make between 50 and 100,000, what's the problem there? I think someone's not muted, or were you trying to ask a question? Probably just accidentally. Okay. What's the problem if I do that? With 0 to 50,000 and then 50,000 to 100,000. Yeah. Yeah, so if I make exactly 50,000, I'm gonna get counted twice. So the idea of being mutually exclusive means I can only be counted in one of the bins. So I'd have to do something like, do they make between 0 up to and including 50,000, and then how many people make greater than 50,000 up to equal to 100, so on and so forth. So that's the idea of mutually exclusive. They have to be exhaustive. So my income example, I might have to create a catch-all category so that I make sure if no matter what amount I see, it's at least counted one time somewhere. Okay. And then generally we want to try to keep these bins the same length with the exception of some of these catch-all categories. Okay. And I'll walk through an example in Excel today and we'll see kind of how all this looks in practice when using some actual data. So kind of a nice easy sample question that I have here. Might be something like you see on the online quiz that'll get posted after class today. And mentioning that for the weekend, right, on Friday classes, you'll actually have up until the next class starts. So you'll have all weekend and then kind of Monday morning, I guess, early afternoon to get that done. Right? I would suggest trying to do it today, though. It's what we're talking about today. It's like 2 really easy questions for today. So let's say I had some SAT score data and I had high school averages, and the highest high school average is 648, the lowest or minimum is 352, and I want 9 bins. All I do is I tell them, here's my bin length equation. All I'm doing is plugging values, right? I have my maximum, my minimum value, and I know the number of bins I want is 9. So I just go ahead, plug those values in, and I get 32.88. Now this is where kind of as the person trying to, remember, our end goal is to get this relative frequency distribution into a visual graph. 32.88 is our cutoff, doesn't look real nice to show someone. So generally, use a little common sense. We'll round this up to 33. When I say round up, what I really mean is like push it up, even if it was 32.1. If we don't push it up to the next integer and we go round down, we'd actually miss the maximum observation, right? And so anytime we're not using this exact value from the formula, we like round it, we need to push it up, okay? So here, we'll use 33, looks a little bit better. I'll even show you today, you could even push it up more than one integer, which is what we'll do in the Excel example. But this is a good place to start, right? So how do we do these quantitative tables in Excel? We'll start working through it today. I'll show you how we get to build a frequency distribution or a histogram, right? Which is really just a bar chart of continuous data's frequencies. And I'll show you a couple other things along the way. So here, some of this will go along with what we're talking about, just some reminders if you're going back, but I'm not going to kind of go through these slides. I'm just going to actually start working through this. So if you open that COVID blank file, give me 1 second, I'm going to sit down and make this a little bit easier on myself. And I'm going to get rid of my video and pull open the chat. So if you have any questions, I'll see it as I'm working along here. So we start out, first thing I'm going to do, you don't need to do, is blow this up a little bit so that you can see it easier. And just so I'm double checking here, everyone on Zoom, I switch back here. You're seeing the Excel file now, correct? You get 1 confirmation on that?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Geez, that's so loud. I probably can see if that helps next time someone talks. So all I'm going to do first to start out, what I just did there was, I couldn't really read the names. So if you see this vertical black line with the little arrows, if I double left click, it auto fits to whatever's in that column. So it makes it just a little bit easier for me to read those variable names. Now that's the first thing I'm going to do. I have the filters turned on, but I don't think I showed you this last class, did I? I don't think I got there with you. So one thing that we can do is a nice little trick. If I started out with some data, if I go to the very top here in the cell A1, right, that's that cell's reference, I hold Control and Shift, or if you're on a Mac, hold Command and Shift, and I hit my over and down arrow, right? It's going to select my entire data set. Okay? From there, I go to the Data tab, I already have the filter option selected on. If I turn it off, notice when I turn it back on, it puts these little arrows here on each variable. Okay? So I could do something like sort the data by smallest to largest. If I have a variable that's not a number but qualitative, I can sort it A to Z or Z to A. And it just makes sure that my observations, right, this observation, if I filter it, will always like move the entire row of data all together, right? So I'm not mixing up my observations. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do, move this over here. I'm going to not show the variables that we're not going to use. So we're going to use this variable in column G, which is COVID-19 deaths recorded at the state level, and I think we have got Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. as well. So if I want to try to figure out, okay, I want to create, one second. I want to create a frequency distribution, right, or a histogram eventually, but I don't know what my bin length should be, right? So we have continuous data here. I mean, if we want to be real technical, the number of deaths is discrete. Half a person can't die. But it's such a wide range of values that even with discrete data, if it's a wide enough range, we might have to use a histogram, right? So I've got the things I need for that to calculate the optimal bin length would be the minimum, maximum, and the number of bins I want. Let's say I'm going to use 6 bins. How will I find the maximum? So in Excel, if I put an equal sign in a cell, it tells Excel, I want you to do something for me, right? Usually it's a built-in function, or potentially it's just a math formula. Add up these numbers, divide by this, take it to this power. But for us, we want to use that max formula, which will find the maximum of whatever numbers we select, okay? So I can go here. I'm going to move the chat bar so I can see it. And in this max formula, I put a parentheses, and it says, okay, select the numbers you want. I'm going to select every single state's recorded COVID deaths, right? And it automatically puts in the cell reference there. Find the maximum of the cells G2 to G53, or basically the entire variable. I'll hit enter, and sure enough, it finds that maximum. I can actually double check this by filtering largest to smallest. Sure enough, it's returning to me that maximum value. Okay? If equals max is finding the maximum, to find the minimum, equals min. Okay? Once again, we can select this entire column. Instead of using my mouse, though, because especially if you're on a laptop, that's going to become pretty tough. Right? If you hold Control and Shift, and then hit the down arrow, it automatically goes to the very last observation. So now I go up here. If I can get this to cooperate, it's not going to, but right? It actually selected that for me as well. So you can select it with your mouse. You can use that Control Shift at the down arrow, or on a Mac, once again, Command Shift down arrow, and it should select the data for you pretty easily. Okay. So we now have the things that we need. I'm going to tell Excel, I want you to do this formula for me, which is, to go back to those slides, it's take the maximum. So all I have to do, I don't have to type that number in. I just select on the cell that has that number, and it says, okay, take the value in L1, or the maximum, subtract the value in L2, which is the minimum, divide by the number of bins, and it returns you these values. So why? What did I do wrong here? Yeah, right? So just like a calculator in Excel, you got to think about order of operations. And honestly, in Excel, even more so, just get used to using parentheses to make sure that you're doing the order of operations correctly. Right? So I'll get parentheses around that because that's what I want in the numerator, the difference between the max and the min, then divide it by the number of bins. That looks a little bit more reasonable. Okay? Now, it's not the prettiest number to like put on a graph. So what I'm actually going to do, just because it's a little bit cleaner of a number to deal with and to think about, is I'm just going to push this all the way up to 2,500. Now that's some nice clean cutoffs for my bins. Okay. So now I've got the bin length that I want to use. I'm going to set up a little table. I'm going to create a column of labels here in just a second. I'm going to create the minimum of each bin and the maximum of each bin. And eventually, what we want is, what's the frequency in each one of these bins, okay? And I'm going to expand these cells just so we can read them a little bit easier. So someone's asking how I got the number of bins on the chat. That's something you choose. So on a homework assignment or something, I'll give that to you, right? We could do this with 20. And in fact, once we get to the end, maybe not today, but maybe on Monday, I could show you what would happen if you wanted to change the number of bins from like 6 to 10.
Even if you change it now, when the bin was changed by itself.
Yeah, so it'll tell me what the new bin length should be, right? Because I was using cell references. If I change this to 10, notice that bin length changes. Now, obviously, this one doesn't because I was kind of choosing that one, not from the formula. But yeah, my formula where I use the cell references will now use that, and that's the real power of Excel. And if I type these numbers in, yeah, I'm going to get the same answers. But if anything changes, I got to go all the way back through and redo it. In Excel, you can set up these templates where everything, right, gets the exchange, okay? So what do the bins represent on a graph? Okay, so I can go back here. So remember, what do these bins represent on a graph? Essentially, they will be replacing these labels. Instead of the different causes of death, we'll have things like 0 to 2,500 deaths. 2,500 to 5, they'll be replacing our x-axis, okay? This is a good question. So to go through the labels, really that first bin is going to be from 0 to 2,500. The next one would be 2,500 to 5,000. And really this part, creating the labels, this is just what you're going to see on the graph. So I could take a little bit more time on these or not. Yeah. Yeah, so when I said I could be a little bit more exact, you're jumping ahead, but you're thinking about this right. So the issue is here, what if it was exactly 2,500 deaths? It'd be in both bins. So I probably should be a little bit more specific and do something like this, right? So less than or equal to 2,500, and then when I'm down here, something like that, right? And I could go through and type that in. So because you asked for it, we'll do it. So what I would actually do here, instead of typing everything in over and over, I would just copy and paste these, and then go back in and just change the numbers. I mean, it saves me a little bit of time. And here, it's really just a matter of like, this is going to be a little bit tedious to create the labels. And honestly, I probably shouldn't even waste a lot of time with it because I'm not trying to teach you how to make pretty graphs. I'm trying to show you the data portion of them, but I want to have something when we get done here that at least looks somewhat decent.
If I wanted to simplify it, could I start with like 2,499?
2,499. If you wanted to, if you didn't want to worry about the equality, the only issue there is here it's okay because the number of deaths. So the question was, could you, instead of typing these less than or equal to, can I make this 2,499, keep this one at 2,500, so on and so forth? The issue with that is going to be when we do have a continuous variable, then I had to put like 2,499.9999, if I really want to be technical about it. And so usually kind of using these equalities is probably a safer way to go just in case you get that continuous variable. But yeah, you're thinking about it correctly. So I've got my labels. I'm now just going to put in this minimum value of my bin, and I'm going to put in the maximum value of the bin. Now, I'm going to do something here that you don't necessarily, you could enter these in manually, right? I could put in, it's basically taking the values in the labels and just putting them into columns. But I'm going to show you a different way to do it because it allows me to tell you a couple other things about Excel that we'll need moving forward, right? So the very first thing is, I know that the maximum of that first bin will just be, well, we're starting at 0, so it's just going to be whatever my bin length is, right? or I could say it is 0 plus that bin length. Right? Now, I hit enter there. Okay, that looks good. What will notice the value that's the minimum of this bin was the maximum of the previous bin. So same here, same here, same here, same here. So what I could do is say, well, the minimum of this bin is actually just the maximum of the previous bin. So if I have it set up like this, the reason why this will be useful is because if I copy things down in Excel, so see here we have M9. If I left click down here when it becomes this bold plus sign and I copy it down, notice M9 became M10. And when I copied it down 2 rows, it updated it 2 rows. So it's M11 now. So that's nice because eventually, once I have the maximums over here, it'll just be grabbing the maximum of the previous bin. Okay, so we've got, so you're saying right here, so the question I had in the chat was, can you show, okay, yep, this is what you wanted to see, the maximum of the bin. All I did there was take where that bin started, and I added the bin length to it, okay? Now, if I copy this down, the problem is I start getting these, so what went wrong? Because like, I should just be on the next bin, taking 2,500, adding 2,500 to it and getting 5,000, but it's not working right. So let's see why. Oh, well, it's because L6, once I copied it down, got updated to L7, and there's nothing in L7, right? I actually wanted, this cell reference to update, L10, but I didn't want that cell reference to update. So I go back to the original, and yeah, I want to keep using the minimum of each bin. So I want L9 to update, but L6, I want to always use what's there. So one way I can do that in Excel is it's called freezing the cell reference, right? So I put $ in front of the row and column heading. And now when I copy this down, L6 stays L6. Doesn't matter if I copy it across 50 rows or, or down 50 rows or across 50 columns, it stays the same. So now when I copy this down, well, it looks like it's working, and it is, because now I'm taking the minimum of the bin and adding to it that bin length, right? And so I can copy these down, and it saves me a lot of work. I mean, it's a little bit, you kind of got to figure out at first, but then once I can copy it down, I don't have to like type this in again over and over and over and over, right? And going back to talking about using cell references if things change, notice maybe I want to change to 3,000. It updates all of those minimum maxims for my bin format, right? So that's kind of nice. So now we're finally to the part where we can start to talk about it. I did a little bit of front work there to get the, where I'm at, because all I really wanted was frequencies, right? And all this work, all I really needed is frequencies. Well, you'll see why setting it up this way helps me get those frequencies pretty easily, all right? So we'll use the COUNTIFs formula, right? And what the COUNTIFs formula does in Excel, it needs 4 things, okay? So the first thing it needs is, what variable are you looking at? Like, what observations do you want? So the observations I want are COVID-19 deaths, so Control-Shift or Command-Shift down arrow. It'll select that range of data for me. I don't want to see that showing up right here. I should be, there you go. So I should be able to move it. No, select it again. Okay, so I selected that range of data. But now the next thing that I need to do is tell it, well, what do you want to check? Well, what I want to check is it greater than 0? And then the second thing I want to check is it less than or equal to 2,500? If it is, I want Excel to count it, right? So if it is meeting these criteria, I want Excel to count it. That's kind of why it's COUNTIFs. Okay. The second thing we're going to tell it is it greater than 0? And instead of just putting in a 0 there, I'm going to actually select the cell But because of the syntax that Excel needs, I need to put an and sign. I'm going to use a cell reference for the value I want. Okay. So similarly, anytime I use a greater than, less than, equals to sign here, I need to put it in quotation marks. That's just the syntax of Excel. Okay. So I want to go through this data and I want to check to see, is this first criteria true, which is the observation greater than 0? Okay. But then I want to go back through and check it again and make sure, is it less than or equal to 2,500? So it may seem somewhat redundant, but because the COUNTIF function has uses for other situations as well, we actually have to type in that range of data again. So look through the data, and I typed it in instead of selecting it, because especially the large data set, it sends me to the bottom and I got to scroll all the way back up. Well, if I already know where it is, I can just kind of type that in. Okay? And then comma, the fourth and final thing it needs, is it less than or equal to, and you type it in like you say it. Less than sign comes first because less than or equal to. We'll then use an and sign. Is it less than or equal to 2,500, which is in that cell? And now this function should look through the data, count the number of observations that are greater than 0, look through the data, and only count them if it's also less than or equal to 2,500. Okay? So any questions up to this point? And hopefully, if we hit enter here, should get the number that we want. Right? So if I wanted to, right, the next one, I want to do the same thing for the next bin, but instead of 0 and 2,500, I want to use 2,500. So we'll say, is it greater than 2,500? Now the equality is only on one of those bins. And is it less than or equal to 5,000? Well, when I copy this down, it'll update L and M9 to L10 and M10. So that's awesome. But there's going to be a problem. If I look down here, not only, okay, yeah, these are updating, right? But what about the range of data? Oh, it's missing the first 5 observations because it updated those as well. So I have to go back to that very first bin and say, yeah, I want these values to change, but I don't want where the data is to change, right? So I'll put $signs in front of this. But here's another shortcut that we can use. If I select the references that I want to freeze, and don't do this before I finish the full statement, I'll hit F4. But on some laptops, if you have an FN key in the lower left-hand corner is usually where it's at, you have to hold FN and hit F4. And now notice it puts all those $signs in for me, freezes that whole cell reference. And if you're on a Mac, it's you select it and hold Command T. Why that's what it is, I have no idea. But Command T will put those $signs in for you. Okay. And then obviously we want to keep looking through the same range here too, so we can freeze these as well. Yeah.
So is it like deleting the data? When you don't do it?
It's not deleting it,
It's already been counted.
but notice it updates the cell reference. So what it's actually doing is it's only taking the observations from here all the way down. Yeah, it's just missing some of it. It's not deleting, it just doesn't, it's missing some of it. Yep. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So now I'll go up here. This one was correct. I'll copy it down. And now we're making sure, okay, we're using the right values, 12,500 and 1,500, but we're also starting at the very top of that data. Yep. All right. So at this point, now we've got our frequencies and our labels. We can create a graph here. Okay. So I'm going to select the labels I want to use. This will be what goes on the x-axis, right? This was just like the types of death that we looked at when it was qualitative data. I'll then hold Control, or I believe on a Mac it's you hold Command, and select the frequencies. So notice both these are now selected. I'll go up to this little Insert tab here, and I've got all these chart types right here. So the chart type I want, I want a histogram, but remember, a histogram is just a bar chart where we started with continuous data. So I'm actually just going to go to this column chart, and move the Zoom chat here, and it gets my frequencies on the y-axis, plots every single one of those bins, throws in my labels down here. Okay. So pretty easy. Once you have the frequencies, I mean, select the labels, hold control or hold command on the Mac, select your frequencies, insert a bar chart. Don't get confused with, especially when I assign finally the first Excel assignment, which will probably be assigned Monday. Don't go up here. There's another way you can do this, which is select the data, go to insert. There's an option here called statistics chart. There's a histogram option, and you can try to do it this way. And like if I go here, there's some options. I can go, what is it? Left click. Yeah, I can go to format chart area, and I can start to play around with things and try to get a histogram to fit certain criteria. But notice it shows wild cutoff points here. There's some issues with the equalities. I've never seen someone for that first Excel assignment use the built-in histogram tool and get it right. And even if they get close, they usually said it took them forever anyways. So for that first Excel assignment, if you use the built-in histogram tool, I'm not going to give you any credit for doing that. I want you to use the other method, not just because, I mean, you might be able to use that histogram tool. Maybe you could do it perfect, but I need you to start to learn how to use some of these functions, right? Because we're going to build on it. So if you just use the built-in thing and there's not a built-in function for the next topic, well, now we got a problem, right? So I need you to kind of approach that first assignment when I get posted Monday in the similar way that we did this one, okay? And also added benefit is I can change things here, right? I could do like the 3,000, and actually, where'd my graph go? Did I delete it? I must have. Here, I'm going to create it again because I want to show you this. Insert column chart. Okay, there we go. So notice if I change this, this is when it was 3,000. If I change it back to 2,500, watch the frequencies and watch the graph changes. Not a whole lot because I'm not changing the value a ton, but it will automatically update everything, right? So this is how we want to start to get used to doing things in Excel, using these cell references so everything will update, right? Can you imagine if at every single place here, or even here, right? I would have typed 2,500, 5,000. It would take me forever to change this, right? If I wanted to change the bin line. Okay. Any questions up to this point? I think do things a little bit quicker with you guys than I did earlier. So I want to make sure if there's any questions, you want to see a cell again, see what formula I had in the cell, make sure you ask now. A little bit of time. Okay. So let's go back here. So you'll see there's the frequency table in Excel. Here's kind of even a summary of some of the stuff that we're going to do. So I want to show you one more thing that we can do on top of frequencies, right? Oh, we got a question. We'll refresh this. Oh, reference. So yeah, this will be up on YouTube. You can go back and pause it and see what I'm saying here. It's kind of the added benefit of having this recorded as well, especially for those assignments. You can always go back and look at how to help for help from them. Okay, so we have that frequency distribution. I want to talk about a couple things here. Excuse me. How could I, using these frequencies, find the total number of observations? Remember last class we said, I've counted every single observation. Yeah, just add up the frequencies. So if I add up the frequencies, right, and hit enter, hit 52. Maybe that's right. So how could I check to see if that's right? Yeah, I could look at the data, and it goes from 2 to 53. So yeah, there are 52 observations. But if I had like thousands of observations, I don't want to scroll all the way down, or a nice way to make sure you're doing it correctly, and a function that we will likely use moving in the future. There's a count function in Excel, and all it does is whatever you select, it counts that cell if there's anything in it. So if I select a blank cell, it tells me 0. But if I select all my observations, Control Shift or Command Shift on a Mac, down arrow, sure enough, it tells me the number of observations. It's a good way to check to make sure that your frequencies add up to that value as well. Okay. Yep.
When you go down, it's like you're going down. Like, let's say it's a dollar, you're going to $2. Right when you're,
Oh, I see. So you're saying, why can't I just scroll down and count
like,
where this?
like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So instead of using the count function, so the question is, why would I use the count function if I could just go like this, right? Oh, okay, it's at 53, and so I know that's okay. I would say, depending on the setup of the Excel file, let's say I had a bunch of header stuff up here, and then I got to think, okay, it starts in 4, ends in. It's just a way to make sure you're not making a quick, easy mistake. And since basically you would have to hit Control Shift down arrow anyways, you might as well type in equals count and then select it. But yeah, that method, as long as you do the math in your head right, it should be okay. So we've got this check there. The next thing that we can do is, we talked about last class, relative frequencies. Frequency. So how could I get relative frequencies here? Well, we said last class, all I do is take the frequency and divide it by the total number of observations, right? So I'll take the frequency, divide it by total number of observations, hit enter. Now, if I copy this down, I've got some issues. Let's see why. Okay, well, I'm still taking the frequency, but now I'm dividing it by, oh, this is way down here. I didn't want that reference for the total number of observations to change. So I'll go back up here and say, I need to freeze that, right? I need to always be dividing by 52. As I copy this down, I want to use, update the frequency that I'm using, but I always want to use the total number of observations. So I hit enter, copy this down, and now it looks like a little bit more accurate. What's a way I can check to make sure that I did these right? Should always equals 1. So we can use that sum function, right? That just adds up the numbers you select. Select the relative frequencies. All right, that's good. We didn't make any obvious mistake here, right? We still could have technically, but this kind of safeguards me that I'm probably doing things pretty darn close to right. Okay. Make sure there's no questions in the chat. Okay. So we got our relative frequencies to add up to 1. We talked about how we create the relative frequencies. We could create a graph for these as well. It's the same process. I would select my labels, select my relative frequencies, column chart. Now notice, I can get these both kind of on the same screen. They're the same thing, but here the axis is frequencies, here it's relative frequencies. Okay? So that's how actually, if you look on the slides, that's how I created those graphs, right? Basically what we just did here. Okay? If I really wanted to, I could do percent frequencies. What's the only additional thing I need to do? Yeah, just go in here and if I can, what I'm doing, multiply it by 100, copy it down. They should add up to 100. Yeah, we could do it that way as well. But I think the way that the complete file looks, we have relative frequencies in there, so I'll leave those. All right. Okay, so where did I leave off with the other section? I kind of want to make sure that I'm leaving you guys at the same point. We did not do cumulative frequencies there yet. We'll save that for Monday. So I'll just show you a little bit more about some of this. So I'm gonna pull up the complete file. You guys, I went through things a little bit quicker, so if you have any questions, you can still stop me. But I'll just show you this. And I got something in the chat, so we'll check this. Yeah, so on the assignment, it would look very similar. Like on the assignment, I would give you, first of all, I think on the assignment, I'll give you the labels, so it's not such a pain for you to type those in. But I'll tell you what the bins are and where they start and stop. I'll tell you where the equality should be, right? So you'll start out with a lot more than what we started out with today. If I had to give you a rough idea, you would probably be given something like just starting out with here. So I would give you the number of bins. I would tell you the labels. You might have to like put the, you wouldn't really be coming up with a class length because I've already given it to you. And you're not going to have to change it. So that makes it a little bit easier on you. But I'll at least start out letting you know how many bins there should be and where they start and stop and where the equality should be. Now, you're going to have to like create these columns, right? But it'll be very clear about, you won't have to worry a lot. How many bins should I be using or anything like that? So that's a good question in the chat. Any other questions before we kind of do one more thing before we end? Okay. So I want to look at, because I thought this was interesting, and maybe, hopefully you guys find it somewhat interesting. So I did a similar breakdown, but I didn't do it by state. I actually looked at the total number of deaths for different age groups. And these are the frequencies for these age groups, right? So it's the same kind of idea. I could create histograms. Here's my categories, right? Here, about 10-year age gaps. And here's my COVID-19 deaths. They've got total deaths, pneumonia deaths, so on and so forth. Here's combination deaths. But I thought it was kind of interesting, and I don't really understand all the science behind it or exactly what it's telling me. But if I look at kind of the breakdown, I could use pie charts. All I would have to do is select my labels, select my COVID-19s, go to insert a pie graph. What I could also do is grab that, but also include pneumonia deaths. Then go to insert this bar graph, but do a side by side, right? Just do a column chart, but it puts them side by side. So notice here, pneumonia is orange and COVID's blue. And these are like very, very similar number of deaths, right? If we look at number of cases, COVID's like way higher. But it's somewhat interesting that came out of this data is that these actually two things move pretty closely together. We could even throw in combination deaths, right? So they had all three of these, right? So let's go up here, do a bar chart. You can kind of see, okay, maybe, if you could argue that combination category, looks like maybe COVID-19, really adds to that death total if you have these other things as well, right? I mean, look at how much higher that is than the other two. So, you get data like this, you can start playing around with looking at the distributions of the data, comparing them by even putting them on the same graph. And really allows you to get some pretty interesting stuff pretty quickly. But also give a nice visual display to people who want to see it. So that was in the complete file just because I thought that was interesting. We've worked through some of this today. We'll work on the cumulative frequency on Monday. I'll probably re-upload the, I'm sorry, I'm not going to re-upload the blank file, but Monday when we start working on some of the other stuff, it'll be found in the complete file, these extra worksheets of US unemployment rate and life expectancy. We're not going to be doing a lot of work with them. I'm just going to use the data to like insert a couple graphs. It's really the same process as we used today, but just to kind of give you an idea about what other graphs we could look at. Okay. All right, we got a couple of questions in the chat. So on this, when is the due date of this assignment? So I will be posting a quiz after class today. You'll have until Monday before class starts to get it done. The due date of this assignment. I think you mean the Excel. I haven't even posted the first Excel assignment yet. It's going to include some stuff that we still will work getting through on Monday. So after Monday, I'll post the first Excel assignment. So right now, what you have to do is today. What else is due today? The very first Learn Smart, right? Get on, get registered, get that first Learn Smart done. I'll post the next Learn Smart today. I just want you to read that sometime before class starts on Wednesday. Once again, it's 10 minutes and it's not a whole lot. You're just kind of going through it. It's really just putting in some effort so you can get some points today. So what about the date of today's quiz? So the quiz that I put up today will be every time I do an online quiz, like, and I call them quizzes. They're like 2 questions. They're not many questions. It always needs to be done before the next class starts. That's always how it'll operate. So the Friday ones that gets posted, you get a little bit of extra time. Granted, it's over the weekend, and I wouldn't put it off. I would just go on and get it done today after class. I'll be posting as soon as I get back to my office. Okay. Any other questions before I let you guys get going here? Also, I wanted to mention, make sure I put up a poll on Canvas about whether you want to attend in-person classes. You click yes if you do, no if you don't plan on doing it. That way I can get a smaller class list so we can maybe have some of you show up more than once a week if you want to. I'll be getting that class seating chart updated before class on Monday, so hopefully sometime Sunday night, reflecting, who wants to be showing up in person. And so your assigned days might change a little bit because of that. So you can show up multiple times a week. Okay. If you have any questions over anything, feel free to email me. Hopefully, I think I forgot to ask today, but I think I had it set up all right. Hopefully, we had no more clicking in the during the Zoom thing today. If I get a confirmation on that, it gives me a little bit of peace of mind. But hopefully, yeah, no clicking. So I'll get this YouTube video posted up as soon as possible. And other than that, I think it covers everything. Stay safe this weekend, and I will see some of you on Monday. And hopefully some of you will be seeing me on Zoom on Monday as well. Okay? All right, have a good one.